Aloha and welcome back to the Ruderman Roundtable, a semi-weekly show that we talk about good government, environmental issues, and other things affecting our life here in Hawaii. Today my guest is Mathew Bellhouse-King, and he's an active member of Equality Hawaii, here to talk about various issues regarding gay rights and the situation in Hawaii with that, and also to touch on the recent events in Orlando. Welcome to the show, Mathew. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Please tell me a little bit about Equality Hawaii and what compelled you to get involved.
Well, I recently got involved in LGBT issues back in college. I was the president of our Pride Alliance on campus, and I kind of just fell into LGBT advocacy issues. I had a friend ask me if I wanted to get involved. I said yes, and it was initially more just to be able to link up with a community of support. And then through that, I learned about how we can get involved in LGBT issues and really sort of developed a passion for that. And then when I moved to Hawaii, again, sort of fell into being a board member with Equality Hawaii when I met someone and they said, oh, you might want to get involved with this. And so it was a lesson in just sort of saying yes when you're offered opportunities. So the opportunity to work with Equality Hawaii has been a phenomenal experience to be able to sort of be involved in issues at a statewide level that I didn't think I would ever have the opportunity to, which I'm very grateful for. And so Equality Hawaii is the state's largest LGBT organization, focuses, it's a 501c4, so it focuses primarily on advocacy for legislation and lobbying. So some of the things that we've worked on is the marriage equality. We'd worked previously on a bullying prevention bill, HB 819, in the 2015 session, we really just try and push issues that are that affect the LGBT community at the legislative level. And I also serve on the board of the Hawaii LGBT Legacy Foundation, which is the primary community organization for LGBT activities in the state. So we're involved in the Pride. Statewide Pride and a number of other activities.
You know, Equality Hawaii was the first, or I think the first organization that ever endorsed me when I was a brand new candidate, so thank you.
Yes, we're happy to do it.
You know, in our lifetimes, we've seen a large cultural shift in our nation and in Hawaii in terms of how people relate to the gay community. Can you comment on this shift? What was the role of organizations such as Equality Hawaii and other factors in bringing us to where we are today?
Well, I think it's evident that a lot of individuals want to get involved in issues that affect the LGBT community. And so organizations like Equality Hawaii, as well as many other local organizations here, are really want to get involved in LGBT issues, and Equality Hawaii provides sort of a centralized location and voice for those concerns and for people to go to be able to address those issues. And so during one of the largest issues that we were involved with most recently was the marriage equality, both civil unions and passing marriage equality in the state. And so Equality Hawaii served as the main fiscal sponsor. So we, the finances that were coming in for that effort were coordinated by Equality Hawaii, and then we had the organization Hawaii United for Marriage, which was on the ground working to address marriage equality, and it involved national organizations like Human Rights Campaign, the ACLU, and many, many others who supported the effort. And so it provided sort of that main unified voice for the community, which I think is really important often for minorities who feel like they are voiceless, to be able to have a location and a group of people to go to for that can be really helpful in supporting those issues, and was thankfully effective in passing that and securing marriage equality for everyone in the state, which is it's good. It's nice to see that after extensive effort of a community, that you can really initiate substantive change. It's the political process can seem difficult and disenfranchising sometimes, but real change can be made by a small group of people who push for it over time. And so, and there's It's not just, I have a very, 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 very small part in a long history of people working for it, so.
I understand. Well, you know, the marriage equality bill that we passed in Hawaii, that was what, 2013? Is that correct?
I think so, yeah.
That was a really big deal, right? I mean, that was the combination of many, as you say, many years of work, and we weren't the first, but we were far from the last state to achieve that before the Supreme Court, you know, made it sort of the law of the land in the following year.
Well, and the note is that Hawaii, people sometimes don't know, is Hawaii is the state that caused the worldwide initiation of marriage equality, where back in the early 90s, the Supreme Court of Hawaii said that two individuals should be able to marry.
And then there was a constitutional amendment opposing that.
Correct. But back in the 90s, Hawaii was the location in the world that started the real debate about marriage equality. So it's something not to be forgotten that it started in Hawaii. So anyway, continue.
No, it's all right. It was, you know, as a freshman legislator, it was the first such large, really large issue that I was involved in. And it was a special session for us, and it was an exciting time, I would say, because, you know, the outcome wasn't certain as we went into that pace. And looking back on it, it seems so obvious, but it's often the way with cultural shifts, isn't it? Looking back on it, it seems like common sense, but at the time it was a struggle and quite a victory, really.
And when it passed the House with the final vote, the feeling in the rotunda of the Capitol when that occurred and the jubilation was probably one of the most memorable moments of my life.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And it was overwhelming, the joy that was there that night. Something really special.
Good.
Yeah.
And Mathew, you say in the House because it was less of an argument in the Senate, it was a little bit more settled in the Senate.
Correct.
The House was where it was teetering almost 50-50 for a while. Right?
Yeah, but the hours of testimony for the bill was crushing.
Yeah.
Particularly, my concern, it was difficult to listen to the opposition testimony, which was often filled with vitriol and just blatant hate. And for me, it was challenging, but I was really concerned for particularly the youth of the state who might be watching some of it. To hear that from members of the community was really sort of really painful to see that sort of venom drawn out. That was really challenging, but I think you know, it had a great outcome in the end. So. Yeah.
So while we have achieved such wonderful successes as that regarding gay rights, we were reawakened last week with the mass shooting in Orlando, and everybody was reminded that violence against the LGBT community is not over with. It's been a long-standing, serious issue. We haven't really seen it overlap with the mass shooting issue. This is sort of the first time those two issues have come together. How does that affect the discussion in terms of, you know, violence against gays now that it's reached the front burner and the headline news story? How does that change the story now?
I think for those in the LGBT community and their allies, you know, this event really highlights the violence that has always occurred against the community and has brought it to a national light that often cases, it's been a struggle for the community just to survive and to not feel like we're under a constant threat of violence. I know even to this day, even in Hawaii, when I am out on the streets and I want to hold the hand of my partner, I have to do a quick mental check for safety to feel like I'm in a position where I'm not going to be potentially assaulted. Because I have friends who very recently, within the last month or two, have been assaulted when exiting a gay club in Hawaii, on Kuhio. And so it's something that's the threat of violence for those in the LGBT community, or even those who support us, is very, very real and affects, is pervasive in every moment of our life, where you just feel like you could always be assaulted if you're any way visibly indicating that you are gay or lesbian or particularly transgender. And then the whole transgender bathroom bills, that's a whole other issue. But I think the violence has really been highlighted by the Orlando shooting and is causing a national conversation that I think, you know, the tragedy is unfortunate, but if anything beneficial can come from it. It's that it's brought the violence against the LGBT community to a national level of discussion that I think it needs to have. And again, you're seeing the vitriol come out when you're seeing some of the TV interviews of pastors who are saying that they are grateful that the gays were killed. And so as tough as it is to hear some of that, I think it's important to be able to still let those voices be heard. We're in a free society. We reclaim to say that we're in a free society. So people should be able to say what they want. But they, First Amendment doesn't prevent people from pushing back at what you say. And so as tough as it is to hear some of those things, I think it's important to, for those who think that the issues of the LGBT community are pretty much over, we got marriage equality and we can pretty much shut down and we're good to go. No. And when you see that hate highlighted, it shows that there's still a lot more work to be done on a person-to-person basis, just to dispel sort of a lot of the hate and misunderstanding against our community. Yeah.
You know, as you were talking a minute ago about you constantly living with that fear, really, I think many of the rest of us don't think of that. It's out of mind. And I mean, there's been various other groups, whether it's ethnic groups or religions, that have been targets of persecution over our society's history. But I don't think a straight person can really imagine the kind of fear that a gay person lives with regards to threats of violence and the constant fear of that in the background. It's almost like it's one of the last taboos that somehow this has been allowed well into what we might think of as the modern age, you know. So thank you for bringing that up. Even for me, I really just hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, and surprisingly enough, even those who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, I think we sometimes, it's part of our norm, and so sometimes we don't even realize that we're under that threat. Sometimes it's so pervasive that when I'm thinking, am I in a situation where I might be assaulted? That shouldn't be normal for me to think. And I'm thinking it, and I go on with my day, and I'm not thinking about the significance of it. But the reality is that no one should have to think that way about just holding their partner's hand or hugging someone. It's really unfortunate. So that's where locations like gay clubs provide sanctuary for us to express ourselves in a way that is often not available to everyone else in public. And so the attack in Orlando was really, compounded by the fact that it attacked the heart of what our community considers a sanctuary for us to express each other. It's the ripple effects of it are still to be known, but I just know it just breaks my heart to know that occurred, and that could occur anywhere. And people were just trying to live their lives, have joy, dance, revelry, and they were mowed down for it. And it's hard. But anyway.
So, this overlaps with the gun debate that keeps coming up in different forms well, it's not even every few years, it's quite frequently. There was the gun shooting in a black church last year. There was guns in mass shootings in schools, and in a gay nightclub. What's your thoughts, without getting too much into the specific gun debate? What's your thoughts? What role does the access to guns, and especially, semi-automatic and assault weapons, what role does that have to play in these various attacks and shootings?
I think it has a huge role. People talk about the Second Amendment as if it's without limits, where you have a right to bear arms. Well, yeah, but just like the First Amendment, it's not without limits. I can't slander you. I can't say whatever I want. I can't promote hate speech. So there are limits to all the amendments in the Constitution. And so the Second Amendment, I can't go out and buy a bazooka or hand grenades or a tank. And there are reasons for that. And so when we talk about the Second Amendment, sometimes I don't think it's even that much, or should have to be that much of a debate. I'm originally from Canada. We have slightly different gun laws and much less per capita gun death, as well as the rest of the Western society related to the U.S. So why does the U.S. have such high gun death rates due to guns and mass shootings more than any other country? And I think the reality is just that we have access in the U.S. to high-powered, high-capacity firearms in a way that I don't think is available to anyone else in the world, particularly that there aren't universal background checks, that I could go into a gun show and just buy a gun without any sort of background check. And that those, President Obama, a couple of weeks before the mass shooting, which is actually a little bit prophetic for what happened, was answering an individual in the audience sort of claiming that Obama was trying to take away people's guns. And it was actually, if anyone wants to YouTube, it was actually a really, really pertains to the Orlando shooting. But one of the things he was saying is that there was someone on the FBI watch list for being on an ISIL website, and that they were really concerned about this individual. Yet, we can put people on a no-fly list, but we can't prevent them from buying a gun if we think that they're a danger. And so it's these common sense gun laws that I don't think are or should be controversial.
Well, Matthew, let's get back to it. We'll talk about that some more. We're going to have to take a break. We're at the Ruderman Roundtable with Mathew Bellhouse-King on Think Tech Hawaii. We'll be right back.
Aloha. My name is John
Sorry for interrupting
Waihe.
No, it's good. Yeah.
And I used to be
Yeah, and if I'm just like
part
blabbering on
That's
something.
right. No.
all the things that you might be angry at. I served in government here and may have made decisions that affects you. So I want to invite you in. I want to invite you in to Talk Story with me and some very special guests every other Monday here at Talk Story with John Waihe. Come on in, join us, express your opinion, learn more about your state, and then do something about it. Aloha.
Hello, I'm Marianne Sasaki. Welcome to Think Tech Hawaii, where some of the most interesting conversations in Honolulu go on. I have a show on Wednesdays from 1 to 2 called Life in the Law, where we discuss legal issues, politics, governmental topics, and a whole host of issues. I hope you'll join me.
Aloha, I'm Senator Russell Ruderman. I represent the Puna and Ka'u District on the Big Island, and we're here at the Ruderman Roundtable with Mathew Bellhouse-King. Matthew is with Equality Hawaii, and we're talking about gay rights in general and the recent events in Orlando. Welcome back, Matthew. Thanks for being with us. So we were talking about guns and Second Amendment, and I think you hit on a very good point where you said most of our rights do have restrictions. We have free speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, things that might endanger people. And even with the Second Amendment, obviously there are already restrictions on what guns we can buy. I can't buy a tank or a bazooka or a rocket launcher. So it's just a matter of where we draw the line. Right. It's not, very few rights are unrestricted in that regard. And I think we're seeing a lot of talk now about where that line should be drawn and whether maybe assault rifles are, maybe they shouldn't be available to civilians. And does that seem relevant to you, or is it in light of this tragedy, or does it seem like that's not what we ought to be talking about? We ought to be talking about violence against gays, or is this part of the discussion?
I think it's a very important part of the discussion. I think, like you say, I think Australia implemented back in the, late 90s, after a couple of mass shootings, stricter gun laws, and since then have not had a mass shooting.
That's right.
And so it's a very effective implementation of policy and legislation. And I think in that sense, there's a lot of heated debate about gun laws in the US. And I think that's good as part of a vibrant democracy, is to have genuine discussion and debate about an issue. But for me, the rationale and reason and logic of putting in restrictions so that folks can't own guns like that, which have been promulgated in mass shootings across the U.S. and for a country that has the highest mass shootings in the world, I think is reasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable to have those laws in place that we know can be effective to prevent death. And for those who aren't taking action on it, we saw at the national level in the filibuster that occurred. Those who aren't now taking action, particularly after something like this, I think are complicit in the deaths that are occurring. That when you can do something and you're not, and haven't for a very long time, you become complicit in those activities. So I think there's a moral imperative to take action on this, not just for the LGBT community and the events in Orlando, but for everyone in the U.S. who's under constant threat of being involved in a mass shooting. Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think if we can have the access to guns, but when an unstable person goes crazy with a pistol or a rifle, the body count is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, not 50, not 100. So maybe we need to look at these kinds of assault weapons. What do you think about our gun laws here in Hawaii? Do you think they're about right? Are they too lenient, too strict?
From my understanding, I think Hawaii has some of the stricter gun laws in the nation, and the lower or lowest gun death in the nation. And so I think, in that sense, it's effective. And we don't have people in Hawaii rioting on the streets that we're having our guns taken away or restrictions to guns. I think you made a good point. When the Second Amendment was put into the Constitution, the available guns were like the muskets where you drop the gunpowder in. And
one at a time. Right?
Yeah, one at a time. There's actually a good video on the internet as well where a man goes into an office to shoot his office mates, and he shoots one and then is having to redo the musket. And it's like guns have changed since the Second Amendment, and maybe we need to have our laws reflect the fact that we have access to firearms that were not initially imagined when the Constitution was written. So, yeah.
And that amendment starts off with reference to a well-regulated militia, which is really not the context in which most people interpret it.
Correct.
But I'm proud of Hawaii in having what I think is very reasonable gun laws, and I think the lowest rate of gun violence in the nation. What laws in the last few years have been passed that address issues important to the LGBT community?
Well, I would say there were civil unions and then marriage equality a couple of years ago. I think that was
That's the big one.
Huge, big impact. I think one that we have been attempting to pass for a number of years now and are still working to pass is on bullying prevention. So many in the community for a very long time, much like marriage equality, have been working to pass comprehensive bullying prevention legislation. Bullying it's another of those issues that I think is starting to get more traction than it did previously, highlighted in part by news coverage of teen suicides related to bullying. And so it's one of those things where it has always existed, but we're just now talking about it, just like LGBT rights. Yeah. And it pertains to the LGBT community because disproportionately LGBT teens are affected by bullying. And the rate of youth homelessness related to LGBT community is much higher than the regular population. But nonetheless, addressing bullying is critically important. And Hawaii has one of the highest rates of youth suicide in the nation. Oh, really? Surprisingly, most folks aren't aware of that.
No, I wasn't either.
And so the legislation was HB 819 in the 2014 session, I think. And the goal was sort of two-pronged, to have a statewide definition for bullying prevention, which included sexual orientation, in addition to race and gender and religion, and a number of other categories, because often it's left out. And so bullying someone on the basis of their sexual orientation needs to be within the definition of bullying. Because a lot of organizations want to get involved and want to, I don't think it's, if you ask someone, do you think it's a good idea to prevent bullying? Not many people would be disagreeing with that. But it's making sure that we highlight that there are certain groups that are disproportionately highlighted. And so that was part of the goal. The other was to provide a statewide task force to address, to coordinate and provide resources for bullying prevention. And so we were working on that legislation, a lot of just community members who wanted to push that through. And so it highlighted the sort of process for community members to get involved in the legislative process and sometimes how challenging that can be. But yeah.
What are some of the other issues that Equality Hawaii will be focusing on going forward? Briefly, if I may.
Now with the recent shooting in Orlando and what that's highlighting, I think Equality Hawaii and other organizations will be talking much more about gun rights. I think at the national level, the HR's Human Rights Campaign is pushing towards gun rights as well. I think the other component, Hawaii gratefully has, there tends to be a lot of, I feel, support for the LGBT community. And we just recently in this session passed a bill to prevent healthcare companies from discriminating against transgender individuals for their coverage. But I think there's always a role to push back against legislation which could be harmful to our community and disproportionately affect our community, much like the transgender bathroom bills, which have been seen in North Carolina and a couple other states, where we need to always be actively ready to address those issues should they come up. Because the transgender issue, it's shocking that has to be something that we're even talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Mathew, I apologize, we're going to run out of time. Tell me, if someone wants to get involved with Equality Hawaii or join your organization or ask you questions, how can they reach you and how can they get involved?
We have a Facebook page, we have a website, equalityhawaii.org, the Hawaii...
equalityhawaii.org.
equalityhawaii.org, as well as the Hawaii LGBT Legacy Foundation, if they want to get involved with Pride or any sort of community events, is also a really good location to go to. So Facebook, on the web, just Google us.
Can anybody join?
Anyone can join.
Anyone can join. Not
Yeah.
going to discriminate against.
No, we don't discriminate.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'm here with Mathew Bellhouse-King. I'm Senator Russell Ruderman with another edition of the Ruderman Roundtable here on Think Tech Hawaii. Thank you very much for joining us. See you in a couple of weeks.